Welcome back to In Response EDH. As always, I'm your host Albert, and I'm glad you can join us for another great Commander gameplay video. On this episode, we have Joseph back, and today he's chosen to play the Prince of Chaos, Be'lakor the Dark Master. This is a demon tribal deck that is built to capitalize off of his commander's abilities, which can be doubled by Panharmonicon to throw a lot of damage around the table and draw a bunch of cards. Next we have Daniel back, and he's brought his mono-red aggro deck commanded by Ardoz, Cobbler of War. This deck employs a ton of creatures that make tokens with haste to benefit off his commander's ability to buff them up and ways to make them unblockable, all while dealing incremental damage when those creatures enter the battlefield. Up next we have Sam, and finally the unthinkable has happened. He's given in and built a Lands Matters deck, led by Slogurk the Overslime. According to him, playing lands is the worst part of Magic, so in this deck he gets to play cards that limit the amount of lands his opponents play, and recur lands like Strip Mine and Boseiju to blow up problematic lands and creatures, and eventually combo off with Mind Over Matter. Last but not least we have Jesse, playing his take on a bad gifts deck, the Beamtown Bullies. He considers it a gifts deck, but we consider it just downright mean. He just wants to fill his graveyard with creatures with terrible downsides to give to his opponents and cause a lot of feel-bads. Before we get started, we would like to remind you, if you enjoy our content and would like to support the channel, consider becoming a patron. When you do, you're not only contributing to the channel's growth, but you're also being entered in our monthly giveaways, as well as receiving patron-only perks. All proceeds of our Patreon are reinvested back into the channel to bring you the best content possible. We would also like to thank our sponsor, Dragon Shield. Hit the link in the description of this video to check out the best product out there to protect your cardboard. You can also support the channel by using our affiliate link when purchasing product and singles at TCG Player. With that said, and the introductions out of the way, let's start the game. Jesse wins the die roll and starts off by playing an untapped Undergrowth Stadium. Daniel just plays a mountain and passes. Joseph plays an Underground Sea and taps it to cast a Soul Ring. He then taps it to cast Talisman of Indulgence.
Okay, I'm done.
Sam then plays a Misty Rainforest and immediately pays a life to sack it to grab a tropical island to the field. He then taps it to cast his own Soul Ring and passes.
Fair magic.
Yeah, fair magic, right?
Jesse draws for turn and plays a Slitherboar Pathway and passes. Daniel plays another mountain and taps out to cast his commander, Ardoz, Cobbler of War. When she enters the battlefield, she buffs herself and then goes to combat, swinging across the table at Joseph for 3 commander damage. Joseph then plays a tapped Smoldering Marsh.
You know, risk it for the biscuit. I'm gonna Chaos Sport my Talisman. I'm gonna take one.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Sam, can you get one of your famous cuts?
Oh yeah. Alright. Yeah. I got a land. I'll take one. Hey, that's one more land for me.
You know what? We wanted to see it. We wanted to see it. Land equilibrium.
So that means
If you play you can't have more lands than me. I'm done.
If you play another one, you have to sacrifice it.
That probably wasn't the best play, but it's the play I wanted to make.
That you got?
It's a $200 card, okay?
Wait, is that a statement? So I'm gonna have to blow that up. So.
No, you really don't. Come on, Jesse.
Float one.
Think of-
or play a land. He's gonna get sacrificed. Crack. Such a dumb.
There, look, now you have less land than me. Look at you, so efficient.
At least he's gonna blow up a $200 card.
Settle for double ring. So.
Don't you want other people to suffer first before you blow it up?
I'm gonna have to discard a card, so that's why, and I don't want to discard right now. Beast within that.
Jesse!
Place the commander.
I've been wanting to play that card forever.
Blow $200 cards.
At least you played it.
The first time you played it.
I could have done other things, but
You guys are welcome. You guys are welcome. Remember me. Remember me.
I will. You're a
I'm sorry, Tristan, was it your turn? I mean, let me know when your turn is. I'll do this right.
We're waiting for Sam here.
that your old famous cut?
Daniel starts his turn, playing another mountain, and tapping out to cast ᴠᴇᴜ 10th Street Kingpin. After that, Dan goes to combat and swings his commander at Joseph again for 1 damage. Joseph draws for turn, and then taps all 6 mana to cast his commander, Be'lakor, the Dark Master. When it enters, he loses a life and draws a card.
Just, do you really think I was gonna play any more lands? Come on, okay, I'll fix everyone's mana, okay?
He then taps 3 to put out his commander, Slogurk, the Overslime. Jesse then starts turn 4 by casting a Soul Ring.
You had a Soul Ring, you blew up my...
Oh, but you go exactly graveyard, Sam.
Now I'll never get land equilibrium back. Wow, the spite!
Dan draws for turn and plays another mountain. He then pays 4 mana to cast ᴠᴇᴜ, Mob Boss. After that, he goes to combat and swings the Kingpin at Jesse, triggering ᴠᴇᴜ's attack ability, putting a 1/1 counter on it, and making 2 lovely Danny DeVito Goblin tokens. Joseph draws his card for turn and plays a mountain, followed by paying 4 mana to cast Plague Drone, triggering his commander's ability and dealing 3 damage to the Mob Boss. Sam then starts his turn and drops an island on the field. He then taps 3 and casts a Wayward Swordtooth.
But land equilibrium! You gotta keep it because it has land equilibrium.
Hit you with a 3/3 beast.
You're welcome. When I gave you, you're welcome.
Go ahead.
Jesse draws for turn and casts Sky Shroud Claim and goes searching for 2 forests, them being Stomping Ground and Cinderglade. After that, he casts a Swiftfoot Boots and passes. Daniel then drops another mountain on the field, followed by a Torch Courier. After that, he casts a Hell Rider. He then goes to combat and swings his creatures at Joseph again, triggering his ᴠᴇᴜ and making another 3 goblins. The Hell Rider will also trigger and shoot Joseph for 3. Joseph chooses to block ᴠᴇᴜ with his commander and exchanging the courier for his Plague Drone. Joseph then draws and taps out to cast Lord of Change. As it enters, the demon draws him 3 cards and triggers his commander again, this time choosing to deal 6 to the Hell Rider. With nothing else, he ends his turn. Sam starts his turn by casting an Evolution Sage, and then plays a Blast Zone, which comes in with a charge counter on it. He then plays a Forest as his land for turn, triggering the Evolution Sage and proliferating on the Blast Zone. He then taps a forest to cycle away a Tranquil Thicket, drawing a card, and triggering his commander, putting a 1/1 counter on it. He chooses not to attack, and just pass the turn. Jesse then draws and plays a Wooded Foothills, followed by casting an Hour of Promise. He then cracks his fetch in order to search up the 3 lands.
I played a... What's this?
Dang, you have so many misplays. Demerit.
This is actually a pretty complicated deck. I don't know why I made it. Oh yeah, because of the name. I get it now.
Jesse chooses to search up a Cabal Coffers and an Urborg, as well as a forest with his fetch. He then activates the coffers for 8 black mana, which he then uses 5 of it and a red to cast Flare of the Hatebound. Before he passes the turn, he spends the rest of his mana to cast his commander, the Beamtown Bullies, and equipping it with the boots. Daniel draws and immediately goes to combat, choosing to continue his war on Joseph, swinging 5 goblins his way. Joseph chooses to block 2 of them and takes 3 damage. After that, Dan casts an Arms Dealer and pays a 2 mana to activate it, sacrificing a goblin token to deal 4 damage to Be'lakor in order to finish it off. Joseph draws and taps 5 mana to cast Kill, Maim, Burn. He targets Jesse's boots, the Arms Dealer, and gets a little payback by shooting Daniel for 3. After that, he casts Talisman of Indulgence again. Sam draws for turn and plays another island, triggering the Evolution Sage and proliferating the Blast Zone and his commander.
You know what? I'm going to do something to help you out, Daniel. Alluring.
So,
Creatures with mana cost 3 or less can be cast at instant speed and for free.
oh, wow.
If you have something that costs 3 or less, you can just put it into play at instant speed for free. This is also the first time I'm playing Alluring, too.
Kill it. Kill it, exile it.
The emotional damage is worth it.
Yeah, way more.
Jesse spends his turn doing a whole lot of nothing and just passes. Dan untaps and draws, and then casts Subira Tolzini Caravanner for free with Alluring. As it enters, his commander gives it +2/+0. He then puts out a Catalyst Elemental, but chooses to sacrifice it for 2 red mana. He then uses that mana to help cast Electric Revelation, discarding a card and drawing 2 cards. He then plays another mountain as his land drop. After that, he casts a Goblin Rabblemaster.
Ooh, that's a nice one to have for free. Don't say I never helped you, Daniel.
After that, he pays another 2 mana to tap and activate Subira, discarding his hand and allowing him to draw off creatures with power 2 or less when they deal combat damage. He then goes to combat and creates a goblin with haste from his Rabblemaster. He then activates Subira's first ability by paying 3 mana to make 2 goblins and Ardoz unblockable this turn, and then continues his relentless assault on Joseph. Joseph blocks a 3/1 goblin from the Rabblemaster and drops down to 20. Since 3 1-power creatures did combat damage, Dan draws 3 cards and passes. Joseph draws for turn and taps 5 to cast Heralds of Tzeentch. As he casts it, he gets to cascade until he hits a spell with CMC 4 or less. He then finds and casts Chainer, Nightmare Adept.
Why can't I ever play against Jesse when he's playing this slow?
He just hasn't gotten his Eater of Days.
Oh no, I got it. That is, it's not. I don't got it in my graveyard.
Joseph then goes to his end step, and Sam decides to put 2 more charge counters on his blast zone. He then goes to his draw step, and then straight into combat, sending his 6/6 trampling commander next door. Joseph chooses to block and soak up some of the damage, but before damage resolves, Sam cycles away a remote isle to grow his commander a little more. On his second main phase, he casts Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. Because of its second ability, making non-token creatures forests in addition to creatures, it triggers the Evolution Sage's landfall ability, and Sam proliferates. Jesse starts turn 8 by playing a Despotic Scepter. He then moves to combat and swings at Sam, who blocks with his 3/3 Beast token. The Flayer then returns to the battlefield with a +1 counter on it thanks to the Undying trigger. As it enters, he has to deal 5 damage to kill off Sam's Swordtooth. Since the Swordtooth is a forest going to the graveyard, it puts a +1 counter on Slogurk. Dan then draws for turn and plays another mountain. He then casts a Desperate Ritual, adding 3 red mana. He then uses 2 of that mana to activate Subira and discard his hand. With the last floating mana, he uses Subira to make his commander unblockable. He then pays enough mana to make the rest of his goblins unblockable and swings all out at everyone. But Jesse chooses to block and trade off his commander for the Rabblemaster, and the rest of the table takes the damage. Since 3 creatures did combat damage, Daniel gets to draw 3 cards. He then finds and plays an Impact Tremors. Joseph then draws and taps 6 mana and floats a black and a red, and then casts a Time Spiral to have each player shuffle their hand and graveyards into their library, drawing 7 cards, and Joseph untaps 6 lands. He then casts a Feldon of the Third Path.
He shuffled his own graveyard.
I'm not worried about it.
He then taps 4 mana to cast a Disciple of Bolas, sacrificing his Lord of Change as it enters, gaining 6 life and drawing 6 cards. He casts a Chaos Warp targeting Sam's Blast Zone, and Sam then shuffles it into his library and reveals a Tireless Provisioner. He then puts it onto the field, and since it's a forest, it triggers the landfall ability and he makes a treasure, as well as proliferates. Before Joseph ends his turn, Sam cycles away Tranquil Thicket again, draws a card, and grows his commander. Sam then starts his turn and plays the Lotus Veil. As it enters, he sacrifices 2 untapped basics, which puts another 2 counters on his commander. He then makes another treasure and proliferates.
I have the least amount of lands out of all of you.
That's a bullshit lie.
But you got a Lotus Veil and a Soul Ring.
And a lot of forest.
I know you're saying words.
Actually,
but
considering. Actually, no.
I
you
actually
don't.
just made
all
my
these are
shot.
forest.
These are all forest. Yeah, they're
Exactly. So no, you don't have it.
Sam then follows that up by casting Rhystic Study. With the spell on the stack, Jesse takes advantage of ⴑ by casting a Birds of Paradise to avoid the study tax. Daniel also takes advantage of Sam's enchantment by casting a Thermal Alchemist. And then casts a Seasoned Pyromancer. 2 creatures entered under his control, and the impact tremor deals 2 damage to each of his opponents. The Pyromancer then has Daniel discard 2 cards, and creates him 2 elemental tokens. He then casts a Monastery Swift Spear, triggering the tremors again, dealing another damage to the table.
Lord forbid you pay 1 mana. Jesus.
After all that, Sam casts a Life from the Loam, to return 3 lands from his graveyard to his hand. He then taps a Lotus Veil for 3 green mana to cast Cultivate, grabbing an island to the field tapped and a forest to his hand. And Sam proliferates on his commander. He then chooses to go to combat and swings his commander at Daniel and a Shia at Joseph. Joseph chooses to block a Shia with the Disciple, and Daniel blocks Slogurk with everything.
Remember, they all gained 2 power from Ardoz.
Oh, they came into play this turn.
Yes.
You said you didn't have 15.
All of Dan's creatures die, and Sam puts his commander back into the command zone. He then recasts his commander, but forgets to crack his treasures to pay for it. But he sure does remember to make a treasure token when it enters. He then goes to his end step and discards a land, and puts another counter on his commander.
Sam, you're fucking up the game.
Jesse starts his turn, casting Curse of Bounty, choosing to enchant Sam. But Sam doesn't appreciate this, so he cracks some treasures to cast Forbid, countering it and discarding 2 lands to buy it back, putting 2 more counters on his commander. Jesse chooses not to pay the study tax, and Sam draws a card. Jesse then casts Bronze Bombshell, and Sam asks the age-old question,
Did you pay for the Rhystic Study?
No, I'm not paying. I'm not going to pay at all. So
Okay.
draw your cards. Jeez.
Jesse then plays a Mage Ride Stone,
You're not paying, right?
Yeah, you're not gonna pay
Fucking
right.
said I'm not going to pay. Whoa. I can't believe my ears. Not a hostility.
He then follows that up by casting Unmarked Grave.
Are you gonna pay? You're not gonna pay? 'Cause I'm gonna dredge instead.
Sam judges the land into the yard and puts another counter onto his commander. Meanwhile, Jesse also cracks a fetch land to search up Zyatora's Proving Ground, and then chooses to put a Dragon Mage into his graveyard with the Unmarked Grave.
My life from the loam. I can't complain, huh? After all the free spells I've been giving you guys.
Oh yeah, Birds of Paradise. Woo!
After that, Jesse plays Reanimate, choosing to resurrect the Disciple of Bolas in Joseph's graveyard, losing 5 life, but gaining 4 of it back by sacrificing the Bronze Bombshell, and drawing 4 cards. After all that, he ends his turn. Daniel then begins his turn, casting Daring Piracy, and moves to combat, creating a 1/1 pirate with the Piracy, and the table takes 1 from the Tremors. Before declaring attackers, Dan activates ᴍᴜᴜ again, pitching his hand and paying another 1 to make his commander unblockable. He then swings his goblins at Joseph and Ardoz at Sam. The guys take the damage, and Daniel gets to draw more cards. After that, he ends his turn. Joseph then draws and plays a swamp. He then taps 7 mana to cast Decree of Pain. In response, Sam removes 3 counters from his commander to bounce it back to his hand. The decree then resolves, wiping the field and drawing Joseph 14 cards. He then casts a Rakdos Signet, and Sam finally remembers his study triggers and draws a card. Joseph then casts a Talisman of Creativity, followed by a Wayfarer's Bauble, allowing Sam to draw a card. Jesse then casts a Wood Elves for free from ⴑ and goes searching for an overgrown tomb. Sam then recasts his commander, followed by an Elvish Rejuvenator. After that, Sam starts his turn by casting a Perennial Behemoth. He then plays a tapped Lotus Field and sacks 2 basic islands as it enters. This grows his commander, and he then goes to combat and swings 2 creatures at Joseph for 8 damage. But before damage resolves, he once again cycles the Thicket to draw a card and put a counter on Slogurk. He then casts a crop rotation, sacrificing another land to grow his commander, to take Joseph out of the game. He searches up a ᴑᴜᴜ who endures, and then goes to his end step and discards down to 7. Jesse starts off by playing an Exotic Orchard, and then recasts his commander. After that, he activates his coffers for 11 black mana. He spends 3 of it to help pay for Gerard's orders. Choosing to put an Underrealmed Lich in his hand and the Eater of Days in his graveyard. He then uses another 5 black mana to help cast the Lich. After that, he goes to combat and swings his commander at Daniel for 4 commander damage. Daniel then starts his turn recasting his commander, and Sam lets him know that he can cast it just for the commander tax.
We're about to not have any turns for a long time.
No, you're about to not have turns. Daniel's gonna have turns.
This again triggers the impact tremors, dealing 1 to Sam and Jesse. Dan then activates Ardoz to make a goblin, triggering the tremors again. As Daniel enters combat, Jesse taps his commander to put the Dragon Mage in his graveyard onto the battlefield under Daniel's control. This will trigger the tremors again, dealing another damage.
Oh no! It's actually 7-5 because of this commander.
Yeah.
I know, Daniel, you only do this because it's goated. I know you don't mean it.
He then swings everything at Sam. Sam decides to block his commander and takes 13 damage. The Dragon Mage will then trigger, and everyone wheels, except Jesse, who chooses to use the Lich's ability.
Oh, my Reclaimer's smaller.
Alright.
I don't have a graveyard anymore.
Why?
Because I discarded a ⴑᴜᴜᴜ
Oh, okay.
from the Dragon Mage.
Yeah.
Well, at the beginning of your turn, I'm gonna untap my commander, and then before you go to your draw step.
Before I go to my draw step?
Yeah. So I'm gonna tap to put a leveler into play under your control.
A leveler? What does it do?
You gonna learn today.
I'll let you.
Remove your library from the game. In response, I'll cast Titania.
Sure.
Okay. You know what, man? I fucking had it. Alright. And I draw and I can't.
Yeah, and then I'll kill it.
Okay.
And then you just do that to me, and then you win next round.
Jesse then starts his turn, keeping 1 and putting the rest in the graveyard. He then plays a Pathway, and decides to prolong an already long game by attacking Daniel, and then casting Ignoble Hierarch. On Daniel's upkeep, he gives him the leveler.
Can you at least do a speech? No, Jesse.
You know what,
Can you
Daniel?
at least do a speech? God damn it.
You know, when Sam cast that Equilibrium, some would say I was upset. I would say I was leveled. It's just time to
Level the playing field. I'm the level of the playing field.
There you go. There you go. Are you happy, Sam?
Okay, there.
Congratulations, Jesse, on getting another win this season. This was definitely not the smoothest showing for the Bully deck, since he wasn't able to find any discard spells to get the creatures stuck in his hand into his graveyard. But thanks to the time spiral Joseph played, he finally was able to find some action and close out the game with the leveler. This is the second time someone has won with the leveler this season, and I'm really hoping this doesn't become a thing in our playgroup. Sam's deck was doing its thing in this game. His commander was getting big and could have knocked some players out, but that land equilibrium could have really changed the pace of the game had it stuck around, of course. But anytime Jesse sees any form of enjoyment on his face, he definitely has to go out of his way to ruin his fun. Good job, Jesse. Joseph had a fairly decent showing. Although he may not have done as much damage with Be'lakor as he would have liked, the deck really was functioning. Unfortunately, he had to play defensively since the table seemed to be picking on him all game. Welcome to my world, Joseph. I don't think the table thought Daniel's commander was going to be much of a problem this game, but it was well built and very synergistic. He actually did the most damage to the table with this game and did a great job of developing his board. Too bad for him, towards the end of the game, he started drawing into a ton of lands and no impactful spells to stop Jesse from inevitably winning the game. If you enjoyed this game, consider stopping by our Twitch streams for Salty Tier Tuesdays every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and Fridays at 7 Pacific Standard Time for live Commander action. Make sure to like the video and leave a comment, and if you aren't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. Before we go, we'd like to give a big thank you to our amazing patrons. We are glad to have your support and thankful for each and every one of you. We here at In Response would like to thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you follow us on our social medias. We also stream every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for watching. Have an awesome day.